Okay, shall we get started, everybody? Welcome, everybody, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Westwood, Walpole, and Dedham. Membership in the League of Women Voters is open to all men and women 16 years of age and older. We do have positions on a lot of issues that are facing us today. So if you would like to become a member, we would love to have you. Just put a star by your name on the sign-in sheet. I want to start by giving a preview of coming attractions. This coming Wednesday, there will be a large meeting of the coalition to support on question 3, which is on transgender equality. That will take place down the road a bit at Temple Beth David at 7 o'clock. There is a panel of, I believe, 6 or 8 speakers and is supported by many organizations in the area. That's Coming Attractions 1. Coming Attractions 2 is a forum, an educational forum about the upcoming election. There will be pro and con speakers on all 3 of the questions on the ballot, and we will also have the 2 candidates for our state rep race speaking. That is the one with Representative Paul McMurtry and his challenger, John McDonald. And that will be at 7 o'clock in Dedham at the middle school in the auditorium. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about immigration. And just like every theater performance, when you get that little card in your program that says, these are the people replacing, it was advertised that Matthew Mayona was going to be speaking. But he sent me an email, and he's having babysitter issues, which many of us have faced in our lifetimes. So we have standing in, playing his part, Jose Carastillo, who is an associate at Mayona Ward Immigration Law and has practiced immigration law for about 2.5 years now. He represents both employers and employees before the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Department of Labor and Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, U.S. embassies, consulates, and state labor agencies, Executive Office for Immigration Review, Board of Alien Labor Certification Appeals, Office of the Chief Administrative Hearing Officer, and federal courts. He is also the associate who deals with asylum pro bono for the committee, which is AILA, MELA, which is the Massachusetts Immigration Labor Association. We do have Marion Davis. She is the Director of Communications for Massachusetts Immigration and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, which is MIRA. As you see, the names are very similar. Marion joined the association in March 2017 after a career in journalism, science, and policy communication. She was born and raised in Costa Rica with an American father and a Costa Rican mother. She came to the U.S. for college in 1990 and has stayed with us ever since. She has a BA from Georgetown University and an MS in journalism from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. I want to say that we wanted to do this program because several years back, the League of Women Voters of the U.S. had a study on immigration policy. And we work very hard on this at every local league in the United States. If you want to see the full policy, you can go to the website lwv.org. But I will just read the shortened version tonight. Immigration policies should promote reunification of immediate families, meet economic, business, and employment needs, and be responsive to those facing political persecution or humanitarian crises. As you can see, this is a hot discussion in our country today, and we want to know what's going on in Massachusetts. So, Jose, if you would start us off.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, I forgot. We have a guest panelist,
Yes.
that is not in your program, and that is Ernesto, who is an immigrant, and he will be adding some real-life experience to our discussion this evening. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for making it out on the wet, rainy night. I know it's tough during the middle of the week. Where to start? So Matt told me to start, my boss said they want numbers. So I looked up a little research, him and I did both. I couldn't find an exact statistic for the demographics that exist today. The polls that I found go back to 2012, but I did get in terms of the total immigrant population here in Massachusetts, but I did get other numbers in terms of the immigrant workforce, the increase in production, and the amount of revenue that is generated by immigrants. One quick side note that I want to say, and I'm sure you probably can back me up a little bit, it's tough to really get illegal immigrants to come forward and say, I'm here illegally. I face it on a day-to-day basis where people are even scared to maybe even come in my office and talk to me. So for that reason, take the numbers with a grain of salt. As of 2012, there was just under 1 million immigrants in Massachusetts. The number came in at 948,061. Just a breakdown in sort of what the top cities that they were living in. Boston came in first with over 500,000, excuse me. Yeah. Then Lowell with 105,000 and Cambridge with 103. Everybody else, all the other major cities did have big populations of immigrants, but not up to those numbers per se. Nearly 1 in 6 Massachusetts residents is an immigrant. And I think a lot of people, that goes in one ear and out the other in terms of their daily lives. Talking about employment-based sort of immigration that we do at the firm, I've started to see a lot more businesses willing to sponsor. The way that immigration generally breaks down in the current system that we have, I like to explain it, it's 2 branches. You have the immigration, business-based immigration, and then you have family-based immigration. I've done a lot of work in the family. I've dealt with a lot of asylum cases, special immigrant juvenile process, which is for children under the age of 21, visa petitions, all sorts of stuff. But lately I've been seeing that a lot of more businesses, specifically in the city of Boston, are coming forward and saying, hey, you've been with us, we want to sponsor you, we want to do anything we can to get you to stay here legally, even for people that haven't been illegally. So that's good, in my opinion. Over half of all the immigrants in Massachusetts are all actually naturalized citizens. So that's another statistic to consider. That's something that I think, obviously, it's a personal victory when somebody becomes a citizen of the United States, and it's not necessarily a badge that they wear on their forehead, but, that's a pretty big chunk of people who have obviously successfully gone through the process of immigration. Something that I thought would be applicable is DACA. I'm sure everybody's heard about DACA, Deferred Action, and how it's an executive order. How does that affect us here in Massachusetts? There's about 6,000 DACA children living here in Massachusetts. And that's 6,000 children who essentially are going to be completely illegal if this program doesn't go through. I've worked hand in hand and kind of a double-edged sword to say this, but some of them are eligible for the special immigrant juvenile process. Some of them have gotten married to U.S. citizens and are able to find a pathway that way. But there's certainly a lot that I've dealt with that I have no option at this point because it's too late for them here. 1 in 5 workers in Massachusetts is an immigrant. That's a big number. So 5 people, out of 5 people you see, whether it's getting a cup of coffee or whether it's at the grocery store, that's somebody who's an immigrant. And they generate revenue. I say from firsthand experience, most of the clients that I have that are here illegally come here to work. Purely to work. Sure, they have fears about returning home, and their countries are difficult, but they're willing to work. They want to work. And all that money that they generate, I left some printouts up front about sort of the financial impact that immigrants might have, gets plugged back into the system, into society. Little known fact, I think, and feel free to step in and correct me, but I feel like a lot of people don't realize this, and it's a strange predicament to put immigrants in. Somebody who's here illegally and working, as we say, under the table, not with proper documentation, they're actually required to pay taxes. And you would be surprised as to how many people, immigrants already know this, and come into my office and say, hey, I got my tax ID number. I want to make sure that I don't have any issues with the IRS. And they're willing to contribute into the community. They're not necessarily looking to take money away from the state or the country, which is an interesting fact. Anyways, back to numbers. Between 2010 and 2014, the number of immigrants in Massachusetts grew 8.1%, which was higher than the national average. And those immigrants, those who owned businesses of that number, generated $1.7 billion in income. Another statistic that stood out to me was that 58% of Fortune 500 companies based in Massachusetts were either created by immigrants or children of immigrants, which is incredible. And these we're talking about national companies, names like TJ Maxx, Home Goods, all sorts of companies. I think there's a perception that exists nowadays, especially with Boston being such a business hub of the world, that a lot of the illegal immigrants or immigrants in general are from South America. But there is a big population of Indians and Europeans who come, and they contribute with the process of an H-1 visa, somebody who's specialized in an industry. A lot of technology usage for that nowadays, and there's a lot of firms that practice solely business immigration that perfect this process, and it's tenuous. There's obviously a certain amount of visas available. Where I kind of want to go with this, and I'm happy to take any questions now or later on, is I want to at least leave you folks with the taste, as I say in Spanish, of how immigrants are not only here, legally or illegally, but very heavily immersed in our economy in the state. And the effects that we're going to see with the upcoming redaction of the TPS from Honduras, the effects that we're going to see from the program of DACA being in the air, is going to have a massive effect, not in our states, not in our city, but nationwide. And everybody's going to feel it. And I'm happy to see that you folks are here to kind of broaden that knowledge and understand it. But it's a very difficult time, and I explain to everybody who asks me about immigration why I do it. I explain to them, I do it because every day is a new adventure. And every day it's a new interesting way to try to help somebody, to try to find somebody a way to stay here, and to try to secure future welfare for somebody, whether it's a child, whether it's a mom, whether it's a dad. So with that, before I start preaching too much, I'll hand it over to talk a little bit more.
Okay, I'm here to tell you how terrible immigration is. No, seriously. First thing, just because you happen to mention that immigrants pay taxes, and all immigrants in the United States pay a lot of taxes in Massachusetts. But just to give you a sense of how much undocumented immigrants pay, along with federal taxes, so we're taking out federal taxes here. In 2015, undocumented immigrants in Massachusetts are estimated to have paid $82 million in sales and excise taxes, $42.5 million in personal income tax, and $60 million in local property taxes. So that's a lot of money coming from people who basically have no rights, have no benefits for the most part in our communities. So, so really there is, okay, let me now start. So I'll tell you a little bit, you very kindly gave a quick snapshot of my background. I technically am not an immigrant because I am a US citizen by birth. At the same time, I grew up in Costa Rica. Spanish was my first language. When I applied for college, I had to apply as an international student. And so for me, I am what my boss who's Albanian, she calls herself an American by choice. I am also an American by choice. I chose to leave my country in Central America, a gorgeous country, highly recommend it, and came here and made my life here. And then in November 2016, I woke up one morning and thought, oh my God, they hate me. They really, really hate me. And it was bigger than just being an immigrant or being a Latina. There was also, as you know, because there are a lot of women in this room here, but obviously we felt it a lot as women because the misogyny was very clear. But I also, for the first time, since I had come to live here in 1990, asked myself, what if this idea I have of America, of this country where anybody can come and anybody can make a home and anybody can find opportunity, what if it's a fiction? What if actually we're a much more divided and much less welcoming country than I had told myself? And one of the realities that I've had to confront since I took my job at Mira a year and a half ago is that we have always been a much rougher country than we'd like to think we are. Donald Trump did not create racism. Donald Trump did not create the immigration laws that we have that makes it virtually impossible for the vast majority of the world to migrate legally to this country. The way that our laws work, if you have a relative in the United States, and not just a relative, if you have basically your parent, your child, or your sibling who is willing to sponsor you, depending on what nationality you are, it might be relatively quick or it might be 20 years if you're Mexican, but at least you have a chance. If you have a skill that is in high demand from an employer, you can get one of those employment-based visas like H-1B, which are a huge part of the Kendall Square economy and of the Route 128 economy in Massachusetts. You might be able to get a seasonal worker visa like the ones that they get to go work on the Cape or to work in Maine or whatever for the summer. Other than that, the door is shut. You can come here to study and then you get out. Or you can come here as a tourist and then you get out. But we don't have a pathway for people in this country, for the most part, who are just regular people when immigrating to the United States to, as folks like to say, get in line. So next time that somebody tells you, I'm all for immigration as long as it's legal, as long as they get in line and wait their turn, just remember there is no line, there is no turn. Now, in the past year and a half, things have gone from unfair and rough to absolutely atrocious. The Trump administration got elected on the basis of a very aggressively anti-immigrant rhetoric and promises of the wall, promises to try to get rid of 11 million undocumented immigrants, promises of America first, stop these people from taking our jobs. And for everything that he has done badly, Donald Trump has kept his word. When it comes to being vicious towards immigrants, Donald Trump has kept his word. And he has done it at all levels. He has been relentless against undocumented immigrants. I don't know how much you've seen, but like right before the last hurricane came in, right before Florence arrived, came out that they had raided the FEMA budget to take money to put into the ICE budget so that they could build more prison camps for children. They've been raiding other budgets. They keep running out of money because it's so expensive to persecute millions of people, but they are determined to do it. At the same time that they are doing that, they are also going after people who have lawful status, but whose status is conditional, like DACA. So it was just over a year ago that they ended DACA, which has given about 800,000 young people in the United States a chance to gain legal status, to work legally, to get driver's licenses for the first time in their lives, to get an education, to just advance like normal people in this country. And they've proven, I mean, they're overwhelmingly, 97% of people with DACA are in school or employed. They have made the absolute most of that opportunity that was given to them. And now it's being taken away because this administration is just spiteful. And the president said, okay, well, I'll have Congress take care of it. It's okay, Congress will pass a new law to fix the Dreamer situation. And what Congress came back with, very much instigated by the White House, was, okay, we'll save the Dreamers. If you build the wall, get rid of half of family-made migration, dramatically increase interior enforcement, double the penalty for illegal entry. Just basically, yeah, we'll let the Dreamers stay in exchange for we'll just tear this country apart. So that's, still the Dreamers. They've also ended temporary protected status, or TPS. I don't know how many people have heard about TPS. You mentioned it briefly, but this is a program. It is sort of ironic, and again, it shows, it's a good example of how our system is broken. Temporary protected status is this really amazing program that the United States has had for decades, where if something goes terribly wrong in your country, if there's a war, if there's an earthquake, if there's a hurricane, and conditions are really unbearable in your country, the United States can just decide, it's inhumane to send you back right now. So we're going to give to anybody of that country, regardless of whether they're here legally or illegally, how long they've been here, we're going to tell you, we're going to protect you, you can stay here. And usually, the terms vary. It's usually 18 months, and then it's renewable. And the way that because the system is a bit broken, by law, people with temporary protected status can't qualify for a green card. Unless they qualify for some other reason, but you can't just be like, I've been here in the country for 10 years with temporary protected status, can I now get a green card? That is specifically forbidden.
I just want to add one quick personal touch to it. I just had an initial consultation with a woman last week. I think she was about 39 years old. She's been here for 18 years. She has the TPS status. She's from Honduras. She's part of one of the labor unions. She's a construction worker, has done manual labor all her life. Got married here to an alien who abused her, and they separated. She's now moved on, has a partner, has a 3-year-old U.S. citizen son. Her TPS expires the beginning of this next year. She's got nothing.
Yeah. So basically, now what's happened is in Massachusetts, we have, the numbers are a little bit confusing because U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services gives us one set of numbers that's higher, and then other people estimate it to be lower. But according to the official numbers, there's about 6,000 Salvadorans with temporary protected status in Massachusetts, and about, I think, 5,000 Haitians with temporary protected status. Those are the two biggest populations. And the average Salvadoran with temporary protected status has been here for over 20 years, and the average Haitian has been here for over 15 years. Now, obviously, this does beg the question, what part of temporary don't you understand? At the same time, the reason that this status has been extended is because, I challenge you all to move to El Salvador or to Haiti tomorrow. It's not, the conditions are actually still very difficult. But there should be a way for people to just be able to say, okay, we've been here for enough years. And actually, that is something that there are some bills in Congress now to try to change the law so that people with temporary protected status can stay here and just convert themselves, get green cards on the basis of having been here lawfully for so long. But it is a very difficult thing. The other thing that is happening at the same time is that at all levels, everything has become more difficult. So for example, I heard today from a lawyer at Fragaman, which is a big business-oriented immigration law firm. All these students who graduate with degrees in advanced science and engineering programs, normally you are allowed, when you graduate from those specialized programs, to stay here and work for up to 3 years in this practical experience kind of program or whatever. None of those visas got approved. So thousands of people in this country who were supposed to be able to work, they're illegal as of today. And they also are doing things, I don't know if you heard about this, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services started this thing. So like if you are here undocumented and you marry a U.S. citizen, depending on the situation, if you've never actually been deported, you may be able to legalize your status. And like even if you've been deported, actually, you can under some circumstances. Yeah, we've had it.
Yes.
But in any- yeah,
there's
yeah.
some waivers and stuff in place, but
Yeah, but in
It's
any case, what U.S. citizen,
discretionary.
but U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services decided to do was they made an agreement with ICE to call people in for interviews at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Hi, ma'am. Your petition is now up for review. Please come for an interview on Tuesday at 12. And the only purpose of that interview was to set them up to be arrested by ICE. And that was happening systematically in Boston, not in Texas, not in Utah, in Boston. So that's also happening here.
Let me add one more, if you don't mind.
Oh, no,
I don't-
please.
I hope I'm not. Today, I was speaking with another attorney at Immigration Court. There's a new case by the Supreme Court. It's known as the Pereira case, and it has to do with the notices to appear. So basically, when somebody's detained by immigration, ICE has to hand over a charging document to the EOIR, the immigration courts, to put that person into removal proceedings. For many years, I'd say close to 20 years, that NTA, as it's called by ICE, they didn't specify the time and date where the hearing was going to be held. They would just give the person the piece of paper, and then that person would receive something in the mail later on telling them, hey, you got to go to court on this date, XYZ. Long story short, the Pereira case in the Supreme Court did say that those documents, if they were filled out that way, didn't vest the jurisdiction in the immigration courts. So potentially giving hundreds of thousands of immigrants a matter to close or terminate their immigration cases. I've gone too far because I'm about to lose you. Long story short, today I was talking to another attorney, and she said that ICE is now giving
September
false-
31st.
false dates, time and dates, to be able to go arrest illegal immigrants. Except, I think it was, like a fake
Well, they're
date.
doing, yeah, it's,
and
like,
then
some
they-
of them are fake dates, some of them look like real dates, but you show up in court and the court has no idea where you showed up.
Or they're giving them like 12 a.m. So
Yeah.
the person shows up at the first thing in the morning or goes there at night thinking that they're going to have immigration court, and then they get arrested.
But the whole thing is just, the whole system is perverse, and it's this really terrifying thing because most of us would agree that we prefer an orderly system. I can tell you with absolute certainty, I would prefer if there were not a single, I don't think it's possible for there to not be a single undocumented immigrant in the country, but I would prefer if 99.999% of immigrants in this country were documented. I don't think that it is healthy for a country to have millions of people living underground, living without legal rights, being exploited in the labor force. That's just not a good way for the world to work. So I think we all agree that legal is better in general. But right now, we're moving in the opposite direction, where a lot of things that enabled people to pursue lawful status, to stay in this country, to do exactly what everybody's always telling them to do, get in line, do the right thing, pay taxes, report yourself, all of that. We've made it so that basically you're a chump if you do that, because they just are going to arrest you. They're just going to ruin your life. And it's gotten to the point where, I work a lot with people who have DACA. And there's a lot of fear, even among people, because of 4 lawsuits that were filed against the Trump administration for terminating DACA. Right now, renewals are still happening. You can't get DACA if you didn't have it before, but you're still able to renew. And there's still a lot of people who are afraid to go and renew their DACA, because if they've moved or if something's happened, now they potentially have the ability to hide. And these people are saying, is it safer for me to just go underground, work illegally, lose my driver's license, live on the fringes of society, than to file the paperwork that gives the US government my address and how to track me down? And, you know, the other day I was talking to a young woman who's undocumented, and she was telling me that she wants, you know, because I don't know if you heard another thing that happened just last week where the Trump administration now wants to punish people for being poor. If you make less than 250% of the federal poverty line, you are subject to very close scrutiny to see whether you really deserve to stay here.
As well
And
as
God
the-
forbid if you've used any public benefits.
Yeah, as well as the public benefits that's going around.
But a
That's
lot
really
of this, you know, and a lot of this, very few immigrants qualify for public benefits. It's very hard. If you're undocumented, you qualify for almost nothing. If you are documented, you have to wait 5 years to qualify for most things. But there are some benefits where you qualify. But they have now made it so that basically, if you are an immigrant who is less than middle class, because the federal poverty, 250% of the federal poverty line is $62,000 a year for a family of 4. That's a lot of money. If you're working, you know, that's 2 people working full time at $15 an hour. We don't have the $15 minimum wage in Massachusetts yet. So there's a lot of people who can't meet that threshold. And all those people are going to suddenly have to look over their shoulders and wonder, if I go and I apply for a green card, am I going to be denied and kicked out of the country? Whereas if I just kept my mouth shut and kept doing my thing, I'd be okay. And that's the wall that we're pushing people against. But the most interesting person at this table is neither of us. The most interesting person here is Ernesto. I'll tell you a little bit of how I met Ernesto. There is a wonderful, wonderful teacher in Boston, Adriana Costache, who started this scholarship at Fenway High School in Boston several years ago because she kept seeing her students, once they got to senior year, hit a brick wall. When they realized if they were undocumented, or even if they had TPS or DACA. If you have TPS or DACA, you still don't qualify for federal financial aid. So there are thousands and thousands of kids who graduate from our public schools who, whatever their lawful status is, still cannot figure out how to pay for college because we've made it so extremely hard. And if you're undocumented on top of that, you can't even get in-state tuition because, you know, let's be as tough as possible on those young people. They really deserve to be punished. In any case, Adriana started the scholarship at Fenway. It went really well. She was able to help several kids just, you know, make the difference between not going to college and just working really, really hard and being able to pay it. And then last year, we took the city, in collaboration with Mira, they took the scholarship citywide. They called it the Unafraid Scholarship. The first year we gave $24,000 to 10 students. This year we gave $74,000 to 28 students. And Ernesto is one of them. And I think of him as just an unbelievable investment that I think if you hear the kinds of things he's already doing, you'll want to throw money at him. But not saying that you should, but just saying like this is our future. So.
Yeah, so thank you for those words. Yeah, I think what both of you guys have said is like the true environment that we are living today. And, you know, DACA, as he said, that DACA has been, you know, solving many problems. For us, I guess is one of the, like, is the light, you know, in the middle of darkness that had opened doors, had opened, you know, road for us to grow. However, now that, you know, DACA is almost ending for many of us, those dreams are going down, and there is nothing that, you know, we can do about it, but the government and the people who have the power to, you know, do something for us to, you know, not being just a bystander, but an upstander to fight for the cause. And, you know, thanks to the scholarship, you know, as Marian was saying that, you know, we as DACA students, we do not qualify for any help from the federal government nor like from the state government, so we just don't have anything. In my case was that after I finished high school last year, you know, I felt that, my academic life was over. But then when I heard about this scholarship, I said, you know what, I'm gonna try one more time because I've been writing so many essays, I've been writing so many applications, and none of the applications that I had, sent, none of them has accepted me. And the reason why they do not accept me was because we do not qualify for those. And so for us to say we are going to go to college is really hard, although we wish and we desire with so much passion to go to college, but we can't because there's no money. And if there is no money, it is almost impossible to go to. And, throughout my years in high school, I worked so hard, and, I've been in many different activities in school. I was lucky enough to be at Harvard Medical School, working in a laboratory with scientists. They were working in different projects and different cures for like Alzheimer's, sickle cells, and all these beautiful things that, for me, I feel that that's like something that I would love to keep doing those things because as a human being, I think that many people are having these problems. And, for us as a future scientist, as scientists, they are working on these things and, they don't even care about having documents or no. They are, focusing so much and solving these issues that is affecting millions of people. And now when we just get out from the lab and we see the reality that we are facing, it's just devastating because there is nothing that, that we can do about it. But as Myron was saying, that this situation is moving to a different direction, in a direction that is the future for us is uncertain, and there is a lot of doubt, and there is a lot of fear, and fear in the sense that many of us, thanks to DACA, we are able to accomplish our dream, to conquer those dreams that we want to be. We want to be part of the society. We want to be part of the of the American society, to contribute to them, and to be able to make America, a better place, right? So that's the idea of us. It's like, so many of us do not have the opportunity. Many of my friends, they do not have DACA, so they don't have they don't have that opportunity to apply to even community college because community college is still expensive and they don't have the money to do that. But, I was lucky enough to get the scholarship from the Honor-Free Scholarship because it was really helpful for me. It alleviates some of the cost of college, although it's really hard and it's a lot expensive. But there is a lot of problems. There is a lot of uncertainty for us. But I believe, I'm like very hopeful person, and I believe that this is gonna change one day, and people will realize that we are not the bad side of the story. We are not bad people. Many people might think. We just want to be part of the society. We just want to contribute to make America, a better place, and to make, to find the American dream, basically. I remember when I was in ninth grade, my history teacher was teaching about this American dream, and I never heard about it. I was like, what is the American dream? And then through my years in high school and at my portfolio presentation, I remember my teacher said, I want you to conquer your American dream. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I had no word to describe the joy that I had to have that teacher telling me, I want you to go and conquer your American dream. Although she didn't know that, my resources are limited, but I still believe that the American dream exists, and I still believe that I will be able to accomplish it, and I will be able to contribute to the American society, to contribute to people who, have no hope, and give them hope. For example, my dream is to become a neurosurgeon, and to be able to say to that patient, don't worry, we're gonna do everything we can in our power to save your life and to give you more time for you to spend with your loved ones. I think that's the most satisfying feeling that you can ever get. I think that is the reason why I feel like I keep doing what I do, and no matter how hard it is, no matter how, how difficult things might get, I will keep doing it because I believe that, the American dream is real, and one day I will get the American dream. So, yeah.
We have a microphone. I'm going to ask one question first. We think in Massachusetts that we're very special. Do we have any legal protection in Massachusetts for our undocumented immigrants?
No.
Well, that was too short.
Oh, yeah.
Do
Quick
we-
answer, no.
Do we have anything, do we have any, two questions. Do we have anything on the horizon? And do we have any of the children who are being warehoused in Massachusetts?
I don't know about the warehousing of children. I do know that there are families with Massachusetts connections who have been reunited, including an absolutely heart-wrenching case in Framingham of a mom who was separated from her kid. And you can see, like, there's video that was posted by, it wasn't the ACLU, maybe it was the ACLU that posted it, but I remember watching that video, and the mother just becomes this like babbling mess of crying and screaming as you would expect a mother to be after being separated from her child for 2 months. And the little girl just looks dead. The little girl is just emotionless. She's just standing there like limp as her mom is just melting all over her. And I saw that and I thought maybe I'm just like imagining this, like Marion, overactive imagination. And then I talked to somebody who was working closely with a family, and he said, no, that little girl, she is so traumatized, she attacked another child the next day because she just had a freak out. She wakes up in the middle of the night screaming. She was just, that separation from her mom for a few weeks has left that girl indelibly destroyed. And that's really terrible. But I want to go back to the first question you asked because that's one of the big things that we've been doing. So there are, like, that was a little bit of a snide answer that I gave you with a simple no because it's a little more complicated. In different communities, for example, I live in Somerville. Somerville passed, I believe, the very first sanctuary ordinance in the state, which actually doesn't mean very much. What we have in Somerville is a relatively weak ordinance, but it's basically many communities, more than 36 communities in Massachusetts at this point, have some kind of bill, some kind of local ordinance or policy that says our police department will not actively contribute to deporting immigrants. There are some things that we can't help. Because of a program called Secure Communities, when you are arrested, the arrest records go into a federal database that ICE has access to. And conveniently, the database includes where were you born. So if I got arrested, it would say Marion Davis, born in San Jose, Costa Rica. I'm just a red flag for ICE to look at. But so that's something that is the case all over the country, and we can't do anything about that. But at the same time, there are police departments where they have a policy of don't ask. So that comes up more, not with an arrest, but if they're pulling you over just because of a traffic infraction, or if they're pulling you, or if you are reporting a crime, if you're a victim or you're a witness, they have no business asking you. Or if you're a passenger in a car, they have no business asking you. And so many communities have policies like that, and that protects people a lot. The other thing is, communities might have a policy of not picking up the phone and going, hey, ICE, we got ourselves an illegal here, and we're releasing him at 8 a.m. tomorrow. You might want to be waiting outside. So these are basic things that many communities have done. Amherst has gone even a little bit farther. The single biggest reason why immigrants get arrested in Massachusetts, and I think probably across the country, is driving without a license. Many states have issue licenses to people who are residents of the state without asking them for proof of lawful presence. But in Massachusetts, you have to have proof of lawful presence. which means that we make it impossible for an undocumented immigrant to drive legally in Massachusetts, which is, great if you live in Somerville, but not so great if you live in the burbs. And so in Amherst, one of the things that they did was at least say, if you get pulled over, we will let you call a licensed driver to pick up your car. Because otherwise, people were getting arrested, and their car was getting towed, and then they had to pay, $500 or whatever to recover the car. So little things like that have been done by different communities. If Westford does not have a local policy like this, I can tell you the right person to connect with at the ACLU who will help you draft your own wonderful ordinance. But we have in the last the legislative session, we tried a big coalition. We had more than 200 endorsing organizations. We worked to pass something called the Safe Communities Act, which was derided as the Sanctuary State Bill. And what it did was actually put some of those protections that I just mentioned to you into a single package and say, let's just make this the law of the state. So for example, is it right that if I am in an abusive situation and my boyfriend beats me and I'm afraid for my life, that I need to wonder, okay, is he beating me in a city that has sanctuary policies? Or am I safe? And in the same way, like domestic violence advocates often tell us, most of these agencies serve 4 or 5 different towns. And they'll say, a woman will come in terrified, and we have to give her different advice depending on whether she lives in a city that has protections versus not. So we wanted to make that statewide. The bill itself did not pass. The 4 key provisions of it were passed by the state Senate, which was the first time in the history of Massachusetts that a legislative body had passed legislation to protect undocumented immigrants. Unfortunately, they couldn't agree when they reconciled the budget with the House. They couldn't agree on how to work it out. So we're back to square one. But we'll be back at square one on January 1st, and we'll be fighting again.
A question for next week.
I just wanted to add so as I previously mentioned, I deal with a process called special immigrant juvenile status.
Oh, yes.
And there's a new bill passed about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago now. Basically, there's a dilemma because the federal age for being adult is a 21-year-old, okay? The process for this SIJS is essentially we have to go to a family court here in Massachusetts and get an order from a judge saying that either one or both of the children's parents have abused, abandoned, or neglected that child, which a lot of the times, unfortunately, is the truth. Parents just disappear. The dilemma was that Massachusetts, that same adult age is 18 years old. So we had this black hole in the family courts where if you were 18 or 19, you would be potentially eligible for this SIJS status, which would lead to a green card and remain here in the United States. And the judges were willing to sign them and give us those orders saying, yes, this has happened, this is no problem. You submit it to immigration, and I want to say maybe 3 to 4 months after Trump took office, all of them got denied, all of them got rejected. And USCIS said, these are not juveniles as defined by the legislature in Massachusetts. My first problem with that was that the statute doesn't say they have to be defined as a juvenile. A second caveat to that was they're still a juvenile under federal law, so that shouldn't be a problem. And my third problem was that the Supreme Court of Massachusetts had a ruling in 2016 in a case called Racinos versus Escobar, where through the judge's interpretation, the judge said, yes, they're juveniles. But immigration didn't want to accept any of that. Thankfully, going back to Horizons, as you mentioned, the legislature did pass an act allowing us to, it didn't get rid of everything in terms of all the doubts or the issues, but it did give us a concrete footing to be able to claim dependency, to be able to claim juvenile as defined by federal law, et cetera, and give these kids another shot, another try. And maybe going way back to when you were mentioning about people losing residencies. It started right after those denials started. the federal government actually started taking away green cards, so resident status, of kids who had gone through this process and had accomplished it, had been working, had been doing their own thing for years, simply because it was done under an equity statute. And they weren't declared as, they weren't under 18 years old when they were approved. So you had these kids who, you know, put money into the system, worked really hard, maybe even with no parents most of the time, and were giving a green card. Trump takes office, 6 months later, they get a letter in the mail saying you're no longer a resident, report to your first removal hearing.
One thing I wanted to mention, by the way, that's really important for people to know is that, there are families where everybody has the same status, but Massachusetts is full of families where every person has a different status, or we're there's a girl I know who actually, a week from, on the 12th, there's going to be this special on Fox 25 about dreamers. Fox 25 happens to be the most pro-immigrant channel right now. I don't know why, but they're wonderful. But in any case, they're doing, and the girl who's profiled, her mother has temporary protected status. The girl herself and her two sisters have DACA, and her father has a pending asylum claim and has lawful status while that case is pending. Another girl that I know, her father has temporary protected status. She has DACA. Her two siblings are protected under the Central American Minors Program, which doesn't exist anymore. This is the way life actually works, and this is why it's very hard for us to say, oh, undocumented immigrants, they're like this one pool of people, and then documented immigrants are a different one. Actually, they're mom and daughter. And a lot of immigrants, a lot of undocumented immigrants have U.S. citizen children, and a lot of immigrants have, a family. I know another girl, another Unafraid Scholarship recipient, a Lebanese girl, came here when she was 1 year old. The people who were processing her father's work visa totally screwed up the paperwork. She's undocumented. She has DACA. Thank goodness she has DACA to protect her. Her sister was born just a year later. Her sister's a U.S. citizen. Her sister's cruising. And she and her mom have no idea what they're going to do. She has DACA, her mom has nothing, and her mom just keeps saying, honey, just get married. And she says, no, I want to go to school. I want to have a career. I want all these things. And her mom just honey, just get it over with,
I think that the advice many people give us, just get married and you're gonna get, the right things. But, our future does not depend on marriage. I think our future depends on studying, college, and how far we can get. But if that is the only way, I guess many people are gonna take that.
Any other questions? I have two questions. One of them is really brief. Speaking to the microphone.
Oh, is this?
Yeah.
Okay. I forget what I was going to say. How long has it been in effect in Massachusetts that you had to bring your birth certificate to renew your license? Because I didn't remember doing that the last time I renewed my license, but my husband had to renew this year, and he had to find his birth certificate.
So
That was Real ID.
yeah, that was Real ID, and I think it's proof of, going
Well,
back
yeah,
to the proof
yeah.
of citizenship.
No.
It's a little more complicated than that. So basically, when Massachusetts adopted Real ID, which was in 2016, we did this thing where we have two kinds of driver's licenses. So you can get a Real ID driver's license that you can board a plane with and do everything with. And that one you have to get in person, and you have to bring paperwork, and you can bring your birth certificate, or you can bring your passport, or a few other things. It's a little more, you don't have to bring your birth certificate,
Right.
but you do have to bring proof of lawful presence,
Right.
which
But that's for the new.
that's for the Real ID.
Right.
Or you can renew online and get an old-fashioned Massachusetts driver's license, not good for federal purposes,
I see.
and
Set to expire, all of them are gonna expire
No.
October 20-something.
No.
Yes.
Isn't that, yeah, Real
no,
ID takes over.
Massachusetts IDs continue to be valid.
They
No,
will
no,
expire, but
they expire when Real ID takes over, is what I'm
No,
saying.
no, No, real ID, Massachusetts will continue to have the two-tier system indefinitely.
No, I don't.
I don't
Yeah, no, they
think-
did. They do, for sure. I know this.
Okay, you
with
answered
certainty.
my question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so you were told
I
that?
thought once Real ID became, it's like
No.
everybody until October 2020.
Yeah.
Once October 2020 hits, you have to have a Real ID.
No, no. Once October 2020 hits, you need to have a real ID for purpose. Like you can, for example, choose to not have a real ID as your driver's license, but you're going to have something else. So you're not going to be able to board
Sure.
an airplane, for
Sure.
example.
Sure, yes.
Or something like that.
Yes,
So as
yes,
long
yes,
as you
yes.
have something else, and most of us have passports, if not, yes, it is going to be more difficult. But you are still going to be able to have a regular Massachusetts ID, which you can still renew online. And one of the things that we heard actually is that since March or so, about half of people who have renewed their licenses since then have opted to just get a regular Massachusetts ID and not go through the pain of getting a real ID. But unfortunately, regardless of whether you have one or the other, you still have to have proof of lawful presence. And if you have less than 1 year in the country, God help you, because they're just going to make your life very difficult.
So the old-fashioned license, which I now have, is proof of lawful.
No, no.
Oh.
Proof of lawful presence is that your U.S. passport or your birth certificate.
But you
or
can
some
have a
other-
driver's license.
You can have a
That's
driver's
not
li-
proof of.
No,
lawful
well,
It gets murky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
I
proof-
think what
yeah.
you're trying to get at is essentially Massachusetts is leaning towards the side of showing lawful presence to be able to issue IDs.
Right.
Right?
Like for any kind
Regardless
of ID.
whether
For
they're
any
real
kind of
IDs
ID.
or the traditional ones.
But real ID is just much harder, and you have to
Yes.
do it in person, which is a pain.
And
Whereas
at
you
the
can
end of the
renew
day, all
online.
you get is a star, right? That's all it is. It's a little star on the ID,
But it looks so pretty.
right?
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. My other question is, when people are applying to become not citizens, are applying to immigrate to the country, you said that they have to, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. You said that there is no line for applying, and I wondered exactly what you meant, that it's harder.
No, I meant so. Okay, so if you already have a family member in the United States,
Mother,
a
parents.
parent,
This is where it
sibling,
gets really
yeah.
convoluted
Yeah.
because it's split into so many different preference categories
Yeah.
and immediate relative petitions.
Right.
So in
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah.
if it's immediate relatives are considered parents, spouse, and children, that means that a visa is immediately available. You can apply
Sibling?
and do it. No.
Oh,
That's a preference. No. And it depends also on your age. If you're under 21, it's different than if you're over 21, and it also depends on whether you're married or you're not married. So the trickle-down effect, I totally
Yeah.
agree with
Yeah.
you that there is no line.
Yeah, but the bigger question is like, so if you have a relative, or you have an employer willing to sponsor you.
Relative who has status.
Yeah, if a relative who says that, yeah, but if you have a relative with status and can sponsor you, or if you have an employer who can sponsor you, there is a line. If you have neither of those things, there is no line, because there's no other way in. Unless you come in as a refugee, or
Right.
unless you come in as an asylum seeker, which literally means showing up at the door and saying, I am being persecuted, passing an interview where they ask you, all right, tell me why you're being persecuted on the
That's
basis of
even-
one of these
You
categories.
even have to request that.
Yeah.
You can't even, it's not even automatic. You have to tell, I mean, I think about a lot of my clients are, I don't know, between 18 and 30, I'd say. And they show up here in the United States and they get confronted by this CBP officer, ICE officer at the border. They get put in chains, they get put in a cold, they call it la hielera, the cold room, because it's freezing. And they have to then have the courage to speak a foreign language, to tell somebody, I'm scared to go home, to then initiate what's called the credible fear interview, where you're sat in a room, telephonically, an officer comes in, and they interview you, and they say, please tell me why you're scared to go home. And then my frustration with that is then the officer can make a determination as to whether you pass that credible fear interview or not, rather than, in my opinion, somebody who has the legal knowledge to be able to make that determination. Sorry
But
to
basically,
cut you
yeah,
off.
but basically, as an like, if you're just a because I mean, like, realistically, most people in the world are not being persecuted, at least not on the basis of these categories. I mean, like most, like, so if I were not a U.S. citizen and I had wanted to stay in the United States after graduating from college, I would have had to find an employer to sponsor me. And if I couldn't find an employer to sponsor me, I would have had to go back home.
Or get married.
Or get married. Yeah, I could have gotten married too. I chose to marry for love.
Fair enough.
Anyway, but yeah, but it's very much, you know, so when I say there is no line, like there really is no line for most people to come here, and that's what's really tragic, that we have created this very restrictive system at the same time that our economy depends on a certain number of people continuing to come in. Because if all immigration to the United States except what is possible under those two avenues were shut down, we wouldn't have enough people in this country to do a lot of the work that we need done.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I hope that explains the no line, because it really is. It's extremely difficult if you just want to come to the United States and you don't have either an employer, or in other words, if you don't have a route in the United States, it's very difficult for you to do it because there's no line. I want to add one thing. 'cause
However, if you're an extraordinarily talented model.
or an outstanding professional.
Oh, no, I meant Melania in particular.
Oh, good point.
You know, the Einstein
Or related,
research,
or
you got one.
yeah, but she's in. Or her parents, right? I wanted to add a new phenomenon. I see there's a veteran. Thank you for your service.
Yep. Thank you.
There is something very interesting that I came across 2 weeks ago for the first time. I had a young gentleman who came over from Russia on a student visa, and he studied for about 2 years, and then he decided to join the military here in the United States. And when you decide to do that, there are immigration benefits per se, in the sense that once you get through basic training, etc., you don't have to wait to become a citizen of the United States. Caveat being, your superiors have to go ahead and sign off on your paperwork and give you sort of that check mark. You completed everything, you're now eligible. So this one gentleman from Russia came, did everything right, did his time in the military, everything, and he presented the paperwork for security clearances that he needed from his superior. The superior refused to sign it and came back, and they charged him with, what was it, criminal activity, foreign ties because he was from Russia, one more, and then the last one that shocked me was other. And he asked me for help, and I told him, I can't, it's military law, I don't know anything about that, it's different. Long story short, he's never going to be able to find out why, but now he has no idea what to do, because the moment he goes back to Russia, his name's going to come up as him having abandoned and not having done his mandatory military time, and he's going to be later labeled as a traitor, and he's potentially going to be, let's just say, disappear. If he goes back to Russia, I'm saying. So I tell you guys, because that's a new phenomenon that's happening, and that same person who came into my office, he spoke with the New York Times, and the New York Times published an article about 2.5 weeks ago dealing with that, because he's not the only one. There's a giant onslaught of foreigners who are willing to dedicate their time and service to our country and are given this promise of, you help us and we'll help you. And when they get to the finish line and they're going to cut that tape and cross the finish line, they get pushed away.
And one guy gets to make that decision.
And
By
it's
the
it's new. That's the most newest thing I've seen.
By the way, there's a whole other crop of people on the other side. There are a lot of people who have helped the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's a very, very dangerous thing to do, bordering on suicidal. And not just suicidal, you're kind of killing your entire family by doing it. And the promise that we made to those people was that if they served and they were put in danger, that we would let them come to the United States. And we are not keeping that promise by a long shot. And some of the people also, like in some cases, the affected person has come in, and then their family gets left behind, and they're separated indefinitely. That is one of the really criminal things that this administration has done, because if we can't protect the people who have been working as interpreters and as fixers for our soldiers, what good are we?
They're creating a whole new group of terrorists.
That too.
Well, I mean, this poor gentleman that I met, he just looked at me and he said, I'm going to France and I'm gonna join the Foreign Legion. They'll give me citizenship in 2 years and I'll be fine.
There's another side to this, by the way. I started my morning rather early today because we launched today the Massachusetts Business Coalition on Immigration, which is a very nice and exciting thing. It's still small, but it's basically, corporations in Massachusetts saying immigrants are too important to our workforce for us to not just stand on the sidelines when all these terrible things are being done. We want to speak out. We want to fight for better policies at the federal level, but also at the state level, make sure that we're doing everything that we can. And as part of the conversation, this woman, Evelyn Buchatsky, who is a Brazilian by way of Ukraine, because everybody here is exotic, and she started this angel investment firm with a Russian refugee who's now been here for like 40 years, and they specialize in investing in immigrant entrepreneurs because they believe that that immigration is an inherently entrepreneurial activity, and that they just know, like they've seen time after time with people who are immigrants, that they work harder for it. So they wanted to invest in them. And Evelyn stood in front of this room of people and said, we're gonna lose so many of these great minds because the United States is shutting down the immigrant entrepreneur rule. So like to make it, they're trying to make it harder for immigrant entrepreneurs to stay in the United States and start businesses here. They're shutting down the ability to bring super talented people to the United States for specialized programs. And she said, and meanwhile, the Canadians, they took notice. So they're starting all their programs. And basically, Canada is just siphoning off all the talent that was going to come to the United States. And so at all levels, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot for the sake of America first. And America first should be about, what is this country? This country is about all of these people. Like, this country has been attracting the best and the brightest from the rest of the world for generations. And to stop
Like a
now
live
is-
example here,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, although the whole notion of somebody fantasizing about, like, operating on people's brains is a little bit scary.
Do you have any more questions?
I have a question for you guys.
Wait for the mic. It's for the cable.
Yes, I had a question for you. Do you network with other Hispanic organizations like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or LULAC or La Raza?
I personally have worked with La Raza. I know I'm a little bit newer to this firm, I'll openly admit that, but I know that my firm is very active with Centro Presente, which is another Latin American organization. I've tried as much as I can, maybe not all the time through legal services, but whether it's interpretation or being able to sit in with somebody and allow them to have a voice, to be involved as much as I could in the Latin American community. For me, that's what drew me into being an attorney to begin with.
How about the Justice Department?
What do you mean?
Well, the Justice Department, it used to, when I was working nonprofit organizations, they used to get $500 million a year that they would distribute in America to other nonprofits that they would give out. And we used to have Justice Department personnel that used to work with us. And they notified us a lot of times that they used to have to beg people to put in or submit paperwork because a lot of those millions of dollars went back and never got used because people just didn't apply for it.
I haven't had, I mean, I've been an attorney for 2.5 years. I practiced immigration law while I was in law school, so I'll call it 3.5. I've never heard of that, to be
I just
honest.
gotta let you
So,
know.
There's a lot of federal funding that has dried up
Yeah.
in the last few years, especially in the Trump administration. I was actually telling Ernesto earlier about Mira hosted for several years a program called Justice AmeriCorps. In the middle of you remember the whole unaccompanied minors crisis from about 5 years ago or so, when suddenly there was a real surge in the number of young people coming across the border by themselves. And a lot of them were having to go before judges by themselves. So this program was started, well, a few programs were started across the country, but in Massachusetts, MIRA started a program called Justice AmeriCorps, which would take fresh out of law school kids, basically, and place them at social service organizations and legal service agencies across the state to represent these unaccompanied minors. And they represented hundreds of kids, gave them a chance, helped them a lot of the time make their case and get asylum or get other special status that allowed them to stay lawfully in this country. And basically, the moment the Trump administration came in, that was one of the first programs they defunded. So, so they've done a lot to just make it as hard as possible for organizations that they consider to be helping non-Americans, including, in some cases, Latinos,
I worked at Greater Boston Legal Services when I was in law school, and they had an AmeriCorps liaison for that. I haven't followed up to see if she's still there, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's gone by now, because I don't think it'll, like you said, I don't think that fund is,
Yeah, that's gone.
yeah.
I have one more question. Sorry.
I understand that some of the DACA kids had been in the military. If the military doesn't, you were explaining the difficulty that the Russian kid had. Is the military supposed to, if somebody serves for 2 years in the military, are they supposed to then get citizenship? Or is it generally the same experience that the Russian boy
I think
had?
the tide is turning towards the experience that my Russian client had. I think prior to it, the caveat for the military service was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it was residency. I think you were able to naturalize at a much faster rate than you would through the traditional route, whether it's employment-based or family-based. Generally, those people have to wait about 5 years to be able to become a U.S. citizen. So I think when somebody, and I'm talking about the family-based, call it more traditional route, but I know in the military they offered an incentive, and it might be 2, it might be 3 years, one or the other, but after that amount of service was when you essentially had to get the security clearances that then, oh, you have the security clearance? Yep, you can naturalize. And that's where my client ran into a wall. They said, no.
But why would some of the DACA kids have needed DACA if they had been in the military?
It might have, it just depend, I think that would depend on timing. If they had DACA, there's no reason, because DACA is an executive program, so if you have DACA, there's no reason to ever abandon it. They might have joined the military afterwards they had DACA, if that makes sense. I'd be willing to bet that any kids, like if they did the military first, unless something went wrong in their process, or maybe, I guess we can't apply for new ones nowadays, but they wouldn't apply for DACA if they had gone into the military before,
Yeah, but there's also, there's enough, there was enough uncertainty around DACA to begin with,
Right.
that in Massachusetts, about 19,000 people were eligible for DACA before September of last year. But only about 8,000 of them had ever applied. Had successful, I don't know, more had applied, but 8,000 in Massachusetts had successfully obtained DACA. But by the time that the president canceled the program, we were down to 5,900. So people were falling out of that program for a variety of reasons. And maybe a lot of them found love, but I think a lot of them just got scared, especially after Trump came into office. So everybody always knew that DACA was a little bit shaky, and that they should, if they had an opportunity to find another
out.
way out, they should.
I wanted to thank all our wonderful panelists, but I wanted you to give us a last word. Voters is in our name, and we do a lot of advocating and contacting our representatives. So I want you each to give us a short sentence or direction of what you want to leave with us. And remember, this is going out on cable, so we have a bigger audience. But think for a minute and give us a direction from this evening.
You want to go first?
Fine. All right. First of all, my apologies because I have these beautiful buttons and I didn't bring any. But if you want me to give you some buttons, they're beautiful. They say, I stand with immigrants and I vote. And the V is gigantic and red and you would love it. But I think, in addition, obviously vote, 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 vote. But I would also urge you to ask tough questions of your elected officials. Even if they are already in the party that you support, even if you think that they're generally nice, ask them the tough questions. We are finding that a lot of people in the legislature do not necessarily feel that the voters want them to support pro-immigrant policies. So it's really important for them to know, if you actually care about this, if part of why you're going to vote for them is that they are immigrants, and that they're pro-immigrant, ask them and tell them, because they need to hear it.
As usual, Marion is longer than one sentence.
Sorry.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go short.
Shorter.
Vote, 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 vote. If there's one thing that I want everybody to walk out of here remembering is, tomorrow, when you go to work, when you're out and about, take a look around and remember the statistics that I gave you, and you would be more than surprised how many immigrants there are already in our community.
Thank you.
For me, it's just remember that we as young adults, we are the future of America. And the future now depends on each one of you guys that have the opportunity to vote. And to make that change will be the best thing that you ever can do. Because America will forever stand. And, you know, generation after generation, if we do the right thing now, we're going to have a stronger America in the future.
Thank you all so much.